Are we gonna talk to President Trump here shortly?
Yeah, President Trump will be right on, right, Blake?
All right, yeah, I'm excited.
He's coming on. I'm just warming him up.
All right, there you go.
Have nothing, all right? That'll be dinner, lunch, staff.
Okay. Well, you know what, Blake, if you don't mind, there's not a lot of us here right now, but since we are going to be live streamed, let's go ahead and get started.
Works for me.
We tend to get a lot of people jumping on live streams. Anyway, so
Yeah.
So let me go ahead and just get started by just obviously I would like to introduce you and we have Representative Blake Moore who is willing to join us today, and the today has been really kind of crazy. We had the governor's inauguration. I don't know if you got a chance to see that at all, or but that was actually very inspirational, and I really was impressed by the governor's speech, and I liked his focus on the family and the different topics that he talked about, and I think I'm really excited because I think he's really in line with you know, President Trump's message and you know, the party as a whole right now, and so I'm really appreciative or for you as well, and the roles that you're taking on. I'm really excited about to see what's going to happen with Doge, and obviously we've got some other things going on, and we are just appreciative that you're able to join us and share with us what's you know, what's on your mind, and tell us a little bit, you know, what this next let's just say year or 4 years, I don't know, however you want to look at it, what you think it's going to bring, and what we can kind of expect. So again, thank you so much, and I'll let you kind of take it from here.
Absolutely. So Chris, approximately how long would you like? I was going to talk a little bit about the committee work that I'm doing and how it overlays to President Trump's first 100 days and what we try to accomplish over the course of this year, at least the fiscal year. And then I'll talk about my Doge role and how I predict that to play out. I always expect when I come to an Elephant Club meeting that, you know, we're largely driven by questions. So after I kind of give an overview of that, open to any questions that you all may have, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, that sounds great. And yeah, it looks like some people already joined. So yeah, that would be really great. I think whatever you feel is most important that you'd like to share, we would just appreciate it. And I'll let you kind of decide what that looks like.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, let me jump in here. It's funny when you're in Congress, and you've got the Trump administration doing a lot of its work in preparation to get inaugurated and then to sort of, you know, kick things off. A lot of what is being discussed from the administration is almost completely not opposite, but it's very different. They have a parallel track, but it's very different context. President Trump and what gets reported out there right now is talking about all things from like Greenland, Gulf of Mexico, and the jurisdictional questions in Panama. Like all that's getting, for a while it was about his appointments. Since winning maintaining the majority in the House, winning the Senate as Republicans, and after the presidential election, so since early November, everything we've been doing has been digging in on what's going to take place on the reconciliation package. And I think it's worthwhile to sort of talk a little bit about what that actually means, because I didn't understand it fully when I was watching, let's say back in 2017, I wasn't in Congress then. and I didn't really understand the ins and outs, and I think it's worthwhile. But we're working entirely on tax, immigration reform, energy. Those are the pieces of major legislation that, and spending reform, of course. Those are the major pieces of legislation that we have been spending probably 2.5 months now digging in entirely, focusing on what that looks like. And candidly, we've been doing it for the last 6 months, watching the trends and expecting a successful night for Republicans in early November. On that same note, I candidly sort of foresaw this coming maybe, I'll say 3 years ago, thinking in 2024, the potential of maintaining the House, getting back the Senate, because the Senate map looked pretty good, given that there were Democrats in Montana, Ohio, and West Virginia. There was a really good chance that we would win back the Senate. I saw this could be an exceptionally robust year on legislation regarding 2 committees in Congress, the Budget Committee and the Ways and Means Committee. Now, the Ways and Means Committee is the top jurisdictional committee in all of Congress. It's the only place where you can initiate a revenue bill, even in the Senate. So it's a really special, cool committee, and I absolutely love being a part of it. And so that is already a draw to be on the Ways and Means Committee. But in particular, when you're in a reconciliation year, that's where the majority of the work is jurisdictionally, sort of appointed. When Republicans have what's called the trifecta, the White House, House, and Senate in their majority, there's usually a big reconciliation bill done largely through the Ways and Means Committee. That is the exact same for the Democrats. It's a bill that I've opposed before, and Democrats always oppose ours. So that is the exciting part about a few years ago when I decided, let's make a run and see if I could get on the Ways and Means Committee. We've never had a Republican in Utah on the Ways and Means Committee. Senator Hatch did a lot of work on the Finance Committee, which is it's a companion committee over in the Senate. But I think it was like in the 60s where we had one Democrat for like one term that served on Ways and Means. So it's a really exciting time, because the other aspect that I foresaw coming, like if we can get that triple majority in 2024, I guess 2025 is when the Congress would start. That is the very same year that a significant portion of that 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act bill will expire. So a lot of the provisions that were set forth during President Trump's first term, and when Republicans had the White House, or when they had their majorities in the House and Senate, they enacted a tax reform bill, but a lot of it actually expires the end of this year, end of 2025. So we have our work cut out for us to redo that tax bill that was done in 2017 and extend it, or to what degree we can make it permanent, so we give some consistency to the American worker and the American family on what their taxes are going to look like. It's great to do what they did in 2017 because it created some really strong economic growth, and it gave people about 8 years worth of, this is going to be really good, and let's invest, let's bring back our overseas operations, or more so keep our overseas operations, but repatriate some of that money that was tax revenue that was going to, I would say, lower tax havens. We want to match what Ireland's doing. So American companies won't want to set things up in Ireland, and they will actually want to repatriate that money. And so we would rather take the revenue. If the taxes are going to be paid, I don't want them going to anywhere in Europe. I want them going to the US. All right. And so that's what took place with the 2017 bill. And the other aspect of this unique year where you have the trifecta, I'm just going to refer to it as that from here on out, that in order to do that reconciliation bill where you bypass the Senate filibuster, so it doesn't require 60 votes, it only requires a simple majority, which we have 53 senators, so we should be able to get a simple majority. In fact, for the first time in over like a century, there's a more narrow majority in the House than in the Senate. The senators have a bigger Republican majority than we do in the House. Think back to 2017. We had like a 30 seat majority, Republicans did. We now have a 3-seat, currently a 2-seat majority. Or a 4-seat. 2020 is 220 to 215. So it's like a literally like a 3.5 vote margin. It's wild, and we're down a member right now, and we will be down a couple more when we lose Elise and Tim Walz to the administration. So we will have a 1-vote margin where we can't even lose a vote for about 3 months. So it's going to be wild with that regard. I mean, that has implications across the board. In Ohio, they need to replace their senator. There is an excellent candidate. His name's Mike Carey. I'm on Ways and Means with him. He would have probably been the pick to be the next senator from Ohio. But because if he leaves, we lose the majority to the Democrats, like he's not going to get that opportunity. It's a real travesty. He's a great guy. I actually feel really bad for him. Who knows how it plays out, but it's a tough scenario. So anyway, let me not bog you down too much with legislative process, but that just shows you the sense that we have here. In 2017, I think 12 to 19 Republicans, either that was on the budget bill, because there's a budget resolution you do first that sets the parameters for the other tax bill, or let's call it the big bill. Donald Trump wants to call it his big, beautiful bill, BBB. I think it's kind of funny. I actually think they should name it the mega bill, the MEGA, the mega bill, because it will be a large bill, but it's all driving towards, the same objective, and make it the Make Economy Great Again bill. I workshopped it. I sent it over to the speaker. He kind of laughed at it, and we usually, when something's funny, that's usually when it has legs in Congress. So if it becomes the mega bill, you all heard of it first.
Now we know why.
And so that's what we're all working towards right now. We have to redo the tax bill. If we fail at this, if we fail at reestablishing the taxes, and it's not going to look exactly the same as 17, it will be different. If we fail, it will be the largest tax increase on Americans in the history of our nation, because it all expires at the end of the year. So we have to get that done. We also have a big border initiative to do, and portions of that can be done via executive order by repealing or switching some of the things Biden was doing. Trump can make a negotiation with Mexico on remain in Mexico, parole authority, catch and release can be eliminated. He can do a lot of things via executive order, and he will. But there are some other supplemental cost things that need to take place on that border security aspect. Happy to go into that more, but just generally, we have to do tax, we have to do border security, and those two things, along with ramping up our energy production. What can't be done via executive order, that has to be done via legislation. And again, I'm a big proponent of more that we can do via legislation has a lasting impact. So I'm a big proponent of it. I hate executive orders. There will be plenty that he does right away to kind of get things back on track, but we want to codify this in legislation as much as possible. So that's going to be a big bill. There's also another component. We have to be able to find some significant spending cuts. Now, so as we look at this right now, spending cuts are always hard, right? Republicans are better at tax relief. That's a good thing for the economy. It actually helps grow the economy. But with our current system, we cannot grow our way out of this problem. And so we have a mission to enact some spending measures and reform that can address this. I think it's a good time to just share with you all, because if you're paying attention and you're interested, a couple of weeks ago, President Trump called for an increase in the debt ceiling. And it happened almost instantaneously. It almost happened overnight. It happened very, very quickly. And as I was watching this play out, and I was texting the speaker as this was kind of in live play. I said, Speaker, look, I get it. When you're in the minority and it's President Biden, I'm going to make sure if we increase the debt ceiling, we are going to make trades. We are going to get spending cuts done. We are going to get permitting reform. We're going to get caps placed on some of the discretionary spending. And we were able to do that. Now, it wasn't it obviously, no debt ceiling has ever been, no deals during debt ceiling have ever been enough to solve our balanced budget. We can talk about that. That's like kind of my main thing. That's why I chose the budget, the committees that I have. But I was like, I see where this is going. We spent 5 months working on a deal to increase the debt ceiling under Biden administration when we had a little bit of power. We had the House majority, and that's all we had. And but we used that and we worked really hard. We spent 5 months negotiating within our own conference what we would do, what areas we would find a cut, how we would negotiate this. Doing it overnight just because President Trump sort of put it out there. Folks, I want you to know I am going to support President Trump's initiative. I am working every single second that I have on these issues. But the debt ceiling, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, you can't just raise it without making any changes. And that's very important to me. So I took a tough vote, and I was the only member of our 8-person leadership team that voted against this bill. And the speaker is an amazing man. He looked at me and he says, I understand what you're doing, Blake. You have no issues with me. I appreciate it. Showed up the next morning. The 38 of us went in and met with JD Vance. We met with Voight, but Trump's budget director, in the speaker's office. And we hashed out a really, really good, solid framework for how we're going to move forward. I made it very clear. In order for me to do a debt ceiling, I need to have associated with it either spending cuts or spending caps or a fiscal or debt, AKA debt commission. Some type of lever we can pull to change the way we're moving. Now, when you have a debt ceiling, this is all about past expenditures. So it's just paying for the past expenditures. So it doesn't really change what we're going to do before. President Trump's been very clear with DOGE, with controlling the appropriations process, with finding whatever type of mandatory spending cuts we can make. That is going to be an aspect of his next term. It wasn't as big a focus in his first term, but he has committed to make that more of a focus in his second term. So I'm all on board. I'm excited about it. I will support him to get through this debt ceiling challenge, because it is a challenge, but it is nothing more than a leverage point. And it wasn't an easy vote for me, but I want you all to know, like, why in the world I would have opposed that bill. And that should be a pretty simple one for Utahns to understand. We get how dangerous debt is, regardless of who's in the White House, right? And so thank you for kind of letting me share that. What I've learned back here, even though the speaker knows that he has my support, and the way you show support back here is if you're against something, you make it very clear, you don't surprise anybody. And then the second that vote is over, if you had to stay on that vote, stay a no on that vote, you show up the next day and you work hard to find a solution moving forward. And we did that, and it was very productive. That doesn't mean we're out of the woods. We've got, until June to figure that out. But I made a very strong point. I'm going to need whoever's in the administration be able to see where we can make some constraints. Because I remember talking to the budget chairman, his name's Jody Arrington. He called me and he's like, Blake, you and I have always been on the same page. Here's my explanation. I spent all day with the Trump team, and we're making some commitments and we're making some changes. And I'm like, I know, Jody, but I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it, and I'm not going to base my vote just on a tweet that says this or that. And he's like, Blake, man, couldn't be more proud of you. I'm going to vote yes. I've been working with the Trump team and I feel good about where they're moving, but I understand why you're voting no. It was a really good moment because, of that connection. That individual and I have both told each other numerous times, like, I don't need to be away from my family as much as I am if we can't solve the debt ever. Not the debt, but if we can't even reduce our deficits. This has been a 25-year problem, right? The Clinton administration was the last time that it was we had a balanced budget, and whatever the work that they had done was excellent. Newt Gingrich, John Kasich were pushing hard against them. Leon Panetta was the budget director. He was finding real cuts. They did welfare reform. Like, that is the last time budgetary related matters actually worked in Congress. They found a way to get to a surplus. Now, historically, that was great. but they wouldn't have survived 2018. 2018 is when baby boomers started to retire, and we all of a sudden started piling on that, and we were not prepared for that to happen. That is the reason that we're in so much debt, and why it gets worse and worse is because our demographics have completely changed since 2008. That's a whole nother lecture. I'm happy to answer questions about it, but all to say, Jody Arrington and I both said to each other in confidence, like, if we can't make a change, even when we have the White House, House, and Senate, like, I don't need to be away from my family that much. That's not me making any type of announcement, but that's just me saying like how much I care about trying to make a change here. Chris?
I just wanted to say something really quick, because when I reached out to you and the other members of the delegation, all of you gave me really amazing responses, because I had a lot of people calling, texting, on social media, talking about everything you're talking about here. And a lot of them, the initial reaction was anger, that you weren't right in line with President Trump. But I think your answer and Representative or
Curtis.
Senator Curtis at the time, I guess Representative Curtis at the time, I think you guys both made it very clear exactly what you just said here. And the business leaders that had reached out to me, specifically those business leaders had reached out to me, were very appreciative, because ultimately they realized that you were the ones pushing back and saying, yeah, we really are trying to, get that, try to negotiate that and trying to get things, back to where they should be. And I think we all want to trust President Trump because we all love his agenda, but at the same time, it doesn't mean we have to just, give everything away either. So I really appreciate that.
Thanks.
And
And
I tell you, a good response.
And I can't tell you how much it helps to have you come and get the reality from us, because here's what's going on in our party way too much. You make a vote, you're a yes or a no, and sometimes another Republican is a yes when you're a no. And to go out and start blasting that other person, I'm done with it. I'm so sick and tired of it. Reagan's 11th commandment was to not speak ill of another Republican. And we're just shooting ourselves in the foot here, because Celeste and Burgess are not wrong either, right? Let me be very clear. When the debt ceiling is a piece of leverage, we use it against Biden. When you're in the minority, it's a great piece of leverage for fiscal sanity. But when we have the majority and it's President Trump in the White House or any other Republican, Chuck Schumer is going to use that as leverage to not introduce better fiscal sanity, in my opinion, right? And so that's the funny thing about that type of aspect. Now, in general, I would be a proponent of getting rid of the debt ceiling and replacing it with a debt to GDP marker that would put us into some type of sequestration or prioritization that would take place. And you would have to set these debt to GDP markers and use it in a productive way to say, hey, here's the goal we're going to work for. Let's try to drop this down a little bit, see if we can achieve this debt to GDP. And that's in a more productive way than actually the debt ceiling. But that's neither here nor there. It's probably not something that's in the realm of possible right now. But all to say, we have a very important bill that's going to come up here in the first, I would say, by April timeframe. That's the hope. We'll see how it plays out, but that's kind of the hope. We have more time to do it, but we would like to get it done as soon as possible. And it will be related to tax reform, spending cuts, as well as border security and energy policy. So be on the lookout for that. I'm happy to re-engage and get you guys up to speed on things. Please, my newsletter, we're going to start doing these videos that we're going to pop out that does a little bit more vignettes, 5 to 7 minutes explaining some of these topics. But that is why I wanted to be on Budget and Ways and Means Committee, is because in this year, we're going to have to set the parameters via the Budget Committee, and then the bill is largely going to be written in the Ways and Means Committee. And I could not be more thrilled to be working on something of substance. Now, the other thing that I'm really excited about is my role on DOGE. We were debating as a conference the rules package. This was back in November, and there was this moment that I had already been reelected into the vice chair role, and there was a moment I kind of understood, like as I saw a conference debating one thing or another, I walked up to the speaker and I said, "Speaker, like, this is a unique opportunity because the vice chair role is pretty flexible on definition. There's some specific things I do in that role, member support, communications, professional development, special orders, that type of thing. But it's got a little bit more bandwidth." And I said, "Look, Speaker, what they're basically asking for right now is another leadership role based just on debt." And And I go, we're not going to add another leadership role. We're not, that would be a big thing to add another leadership position. Why don't, and I'm on all the committees that deal with it. Why don't you have me kind of pointed to that? And I can even liaise with Doge. And he goes, Blake, that's a great idea. So I got, kind of his buy-in. And then as the caucus formed, was, put as a co-chair of it. This is a really exciting thing. So 2 aspects I'll just quickly explain, and then we can open up for questions. What we want to do on this first quarter is, as I witnessed what took place when we met with Vivek and Elon, it's like 20 of us bicameral, so senators were there. It was about 20 of us. It was a very, very small group. And just in that meeting, it was like everybody had an idea. Everybody wanted to get like some pet project or thought process, more so like a thought or a scale, a framework or something. Then we went to the larger group meeting with the entire Republican conference. There was like 80 people that went up to the microphones with some idea about how education reform or some idea about what we could do to streamline some of the military processes. It's like, why in the world do, why every 2 years do they rotate to a new base, right? Let's let them make sure they have their families intact. And maybe we could do some cost savings there. There's a lot of ways to more efficiently run every program in the government, whether it's defense related or transportation related, right? So there's a lot that you can do that. So everybody's firing off all these ideas. And that was the moment I said, look, this is like a project I did before I was in Congress when I was working for Cicero Group. What we need to do is collect all of this and make it very simple and graph this in a prioritization chart. And a chart that you would actually graph it in is like an XY axis that says this particular idea or initiative would be lower impact. It wouldn't be that, significant of impact, but it's very easy to implement. And that could be a quick win. And then there's like the high impact, easy to implement, but that's a quick win, or low hanging fruit, or something that's really hard to implement, but will be very high impact. Well, put that on like the horizon as this is an important thing. Let's go after it. So what we want to do as a caucus, gather up all that information, take it to Elon and Vivek by the end of the quarter, and kind of give them some parameters on how they can go about prioritizing things. In order to do anything back here, it has to either pass the Senate in a filibuster-proof bipartisan way. It has to be passed on party line votes in a reconciliation, but you only get that opportunity every 2 or 3 times if you have all the right majorities. Then it can be passed via executive order, or it can be passed via a judicial type of approach, like through the court system. So we want to help them. These guys are not steeped in government. They say a lot of things that is like, we'll just get rid of that $2 trillion deficit. Well, there's your entire Social Security program, and Medicare's out the door. Like, you cannot do that. But for Elon, he's like, well, I did it at 5 other companies. Why couldn't I do it here? So we want to help get them up to speed on all of the world that exists, and almost make it so they can have some runway to go do something pretty productive. So that's my specific role on Doge. Otherwise, the big plan for Doge is that by July 4th of 2026, the 250th anniversary of our great nation, they'll have made some changes, proposed some new changes, and long-term even done more. So it's a really exciting thing to be a part of. I'm cautiously optimistic. I'm just gonna say that's what's gonna force me to do the work to make it that there can be a successful outcome here. So it's one of those things that gets a lot of hype. Change back here in Washington is very difficult. The founders actually created it to be that way, and now that we've accumulated so much growth and negative outcomes, it's going to be tough. So I'm eyes wide open there. All the things that I just highlighted to you are going to be monumental with a 1-seat majority. Now, maybe a 2 to 3 seat majority when we refill some of those seats. But as I've seen back here, people get a university president offer and they decide to leave Congress and this and that. It also happens on the Democrat side, and God forbid anybody were to pass away, but that happens. It's already something that happens. And so we will have a very narrow majority, and it is going to be very difficult to get something done. just as a last piece of this bill. We have to balance in the tax bill the more blue state folks that are in a Biden +5, or, you know, to some degree, even a Biden +7 district, and the individuals that are in a Trump +40 district. That is the scope of our conference. Somebody that won a district that's heavily Democrat, and somebody that won a district that's like not heavily Democrat, but leans very strongly, like, but leans Democrat, or someone that's in like the most ruby red district that you could create. And there are tax policies that are not simpatico with those two areas. And so we're working together as a conference more than I ever have seen us to try to get it to the point where we can get this thing done. And it is going to be monumentally difficult, but everybody's committed to trying. And that's the important part. Every voice of the party is committed to trying. And that's where we'll go. So let me pause there. Chris, I hope that wasn't too much of a ramble, but it's all I've been thinking about for about 3 months now, and really candidly more like 6, when we were pretty confident that we had this opportunity to go after it. Doing a bipartisan tax bill, we had a great one last term, and it got thwarted. And there was seriously no reason for that to have gotten thwarted. You and I had talked about that, and it was a disappointing factor. There still can be good work done in a bipartisan way on tax. And I think that's important for people to know. Republicans typically take a more broad approach. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Democrats go a little bit more, like you'll see in the Inflation Reduction Act, that will be like more of their specific initiatives that they wanted to do and give tax credits to. They create jobs, and tax credits are good. And tax credits are generally good, but we like to apply them to more broad aspects of a broader economy instead of more pinpoint narrow. And I wrote a great op-ed on this. Maybe I'll try to find it, and I'll shoot it over to you, Chris. And you can
send it over to me, please.
And it basically compared 2017's tax reconciliation bill with 2021's reconciliation bill. Both of them out of the same committee, Ways and Means Committee. But one was led by Republicans and one was led by Democrats, and you have vastly different outcomes. And inflation being one of the ones from the latter that took place. So fire away. I've got some time still, and I hope that was at least a look inside what I'm doing on a daily basis.
I appreciate that.
Thank you, Representative Moore. You've been doing a great job. We love hearing your dedication to balancing the budget, reducing our deficit. How can we start getting others to do that? And I know you've been talking about it, but year after year, even decade after decade, it seems like there's no balanced budget amendment. We need to be forced to do it, I think. I have to balance my budget. Why can't my government do that?
Yeah.
And then also a line item veto where we get out that pork barrel spending that shouldn't be there.
So I just grabbed this out of my bag. If you can probably just Google it. But this is a really great document. This is what we put together on the House Budget Committee. It's called Reverse the Curse. And it was our roadmap to work towards a balanced budget. There's expectations of a certain growth amount in there. There's various areas of spending cuts, and it actually doesn't even address our 2 biggest spending items, soon to be overtaken, by the way. But Social Security and Medicare are some of our 2 biggest spending items. And it doesn't even, contrary to what you hear from some Democrats trying to use it as a political tool, like we're not out there cutting that program. So let me be very candid. In my lifetime, I think we've had one balanced budget. That was in the late 90s, right? I was born in 1980. Every 15 or so years, 12 to 15 years, it was, if you go historically look back at our nation, we would find a way back to a surplus. But it wasn't for very long, but we would do it, and we would kind of keep moving in this direction. We'd hit a surplus, we would do this kind of stuff. We made one mistake in the early 2000s, and that was not recognize that the the baby boomer population was going to start to retire. We had such strong economic growth. They were paying into the system, but it was time in 2008 to start receiving that benefit as was designed. Social Security is not as big a problem as right now because it still pays for itself. It has a trust fund. It is depleting, but it still pays for itself, and the FICA taxes associated with it are sufficient to fulfill that program. Medicare, on the other hand, basically comes in two parts, and then you add American Advantage and Part C and Part D and all that stuff. But Part A and Part B are the main aspects to Medicare. Part A still has a trust fund, and it essentially is still paying for itself. Part B, it more draws on the general fund. And we're going through a demographic issue right now where we are living longer, but we're living more unhealthy. 31% of Medicare expenditures are going towards treating diabetes. We will never get out of our budget problems if we have longer lifespans and very unhealthy lifespans because we're tied into a Medicare program. That's hasn't been our main reason, our main issue up to today, though. It is what is the unfunded liability that exists with those programs that ultimately topples us over. And that's why my big concern is. That's why I want to do a debt commission. That's why I want to solve this before those trust funds run dry. That's why I wish that folks, and largely some of my Democrat colleagues, would have been more open to an idea that President Bush had to grow those trust funds at a more market rate. Instead of leaving them in a government trust fund that doesn't grow, doesn't yield much of a percentage, we could have put those just like a university does their endowment. Go look at Harvard or Yale. They have grown those endowments to serve their population. And it's okay for them to do it, but not for us to do it George W. Bush wanted to have portions of that, privatized to be able to have more interest-bearing mutual fund opportunities for that type of stuff. It would have been a significant help. Go look at what the S&P was closing at back in 2003, and then look at the S&P's closing at today. I mean, it's insane what the growth we would have seen. But some of my Democrat colleagues would be like, well, then you're subject to when the market goes down, where do you pay that out? How are we doing it now? We're doing it via deficit spending, for crying out loud. At least if we would have had that growth over a 20-year time period, we would have had so much, we would have been in such a better fiscal shape for those types of programs. But leading up to today, defense has gone from 50% of our budget to 13% of our budget. It's now at the lowest it's ever been in our nation as a percentage of GDP. It's less than 3% percentage of GDP. So the defense budget as a whole of the GDP, while the number goes up, percentage of it shrinks, but it is programs, it is additional type of programs. And when you look at one on their own, it is what it is. Not one of them topples us over, but we've just taken on too much. Welfare programs, Medicaid's a big one, right? And so it can come down into one major issue: health. Health becomes a massive expenditure, whether that be through some like Medicaid, other type of SNAP type of benefits, but all that. The last thing I'll say on this, we can cut $100 billion of spending, but our interest is increasing by $200 billion on a year-over-year basis, the interest on the debt. And so we've gotten ourselves into a point where it's really treacherous. I was analyzing it today in our Ways and Means lunch about if the Treasury yield, the 10-year note goes over 5%. I mean, we're going to almost move up to $2 trillion a year in what we're doing with regards to just paying interest on the debt. So of all those little other programs, the fact that we didn't get out ahead of it early enough in early 2000s has created this massive problem now. And our interest on the debt is growing way too much. COVID spiked it up too with the relief spending that we did there, but it was already moving up in that direction. So that said, we have the strongest economy in the world. We have assets that far supersede our $36 trillion in debt. Any banker that was looking at our asset to debt ratio would be like, oh, gladly lend that person money because they're a strong economy. Everything looks good. They've got all these reserves and assets. But me as a realist is like, well, we're not going to sell Glacier National Park. It's worth something, but we're not going to sell it off. So we can't necessarily liquidate that if we ever needed to. And that's why debt is such a big concern to me. But it is what it is. So you will not see a balanced budget amendment anytime soon. And John Thune spoke about it, about how close they were maybe 20 years ago. And it was the early mid 2000s. He kind of gave a lecture about it. It was very, very insightful. What we need to do is stuff like this, where we start reducing that debt to GDP ratio and bending that curve back down in the other direction while keeping our economy strong. And those are the two aspects that we're trying to at least initiate here in this first quarter, or in the first probably 4 to 5 months of Trump's administration of, strong economic growth through pro-growth tax policy, but also find every area of waste, fraud, and abuse and cut spending that we absolutely can. It will not result into a balanced budget. Don't set your expectations so high. But if we can start moving that arc the other way, that will be a significantly positive thing, and that will bring more confidence back to our system. And then the bond markets, credit markets, rating agencies, we look even better. We create more strength on the world stage. The US dollar stays a strong currency. Those are the necessary aspects to keep moving in the right direction. This puts us on a balanced budget in 10 years. Now, but we have to have the White House, House, and Senate for 10 straight years to even come close to implementing it. And that hasn't happened, as you've all seen. That goes back and forth all the time. But for what I can control for the next 2 years, I'm excited about trying.
Thank you.
Unless somebody else has a question, I have a quick question for you. Obviously, you're very focused on budgetary things like that, so this may be a little bit different. But the big issue here in Utah has been about immigration. We're struggling out here. I'm sure you're probably familiar with all of the illegal immigrants that have been coming in and the crime that's been happening, and it's been pretty bad. What are you seeing? I mean, there's a lot of talk about deportation and things like that, but what are you actually seeing being discussed as real possibilities? Because sometimes I feel like sometimes those are just messages to stop the influx while things are getting done, right? So I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah. So again, as I mentioned, part of this reconciliation bill, Trump's big bill, as he calls it, the big beautiful bill. I think that's hilarious. The key aspect of that is that if it is a more narrow bill and there's less about tax reform and that kind of stuff because it's more complex, the first most important priority will be related to border security. But there needs to be supplemental funding in there to help with the repatriation process that's going to play out. I think people are dead serious about this. Republicans won the election based on this. You've got blue states like New York where individuals are just really fed up with just the virtue signaling that's taken place over the last little while. Look, Democrats want a legal status to folks. And many of them have been here for a long time, have contributed to the economy and this and that, and they want to give some assurity to them. Now let's take DACA out of there because there's a lot of agreement across the board. That's a small subset, and there should be solutions there. But they want to be able to provide some type of legal pathway there. Republicans are always focused on border security. And so that's where the rub has happened over the last 30 years. Democrats won't sign on to a border security package unless they get a lot of their legal pathways set up. And it's not like the Republicans are opposed in any way to legal immigration, getting people the visa programs enhanced so they provide a pro-work type of environment. Like, we're all for that type of stuff. But if you invite too much of that stuff in without shoring up the border, and the asylum process, then you're going to get overrun like we have for the last 3.5 years. That's the fundamental problem with the way that the legislation hasn't been able to get solved over the last 30 years. Republicans focused on border security, Democrats focused on immigration reform. There is plenty of immigration reform Republicans will do, but we need to make sure that we shore up the border security part first. Democrats are like, well, I don't trust you. I don't think you're going to do enough of this immigration reform. So I'm not going to give you border security. But if you do all this immigration reform before the border security, you will invite more cartel activity because they'll be like, hey, there's a lot of great opportunities in America, which there is. That's the problem. So I I think what you're going to see is you're going to see some executive action. And if we can get this bill done, you'll see the deportation, repatriation money applied and prioritized. I think clearly you have illegal immigrants that criminal activity that to know and to anything related to drug, fentanyl, drug running, I guess you would call it, and the like. That is where you start. And I think that is a 90-10 issue. I think that, border cities in Texas are all turning and voting heavily in favor of Republicans now, when they were a little bit more of a blue district. And their folks are like, we got to deal with this. And so I think you're going to see follow through here. It's a clear mandate from President Trump to do this. The media might try to construe this as we're going to be ripping families apart and this and that. Media will play media games, but I do not remember the media blasting President Biden when there was 38 migrants that were killed, suffocated in the back of a truck in San Antonio because the cartels did the most illegal child, adult, sex trafficking that we've ever seen, and just illegal trafficking. And you just didn't see the blasting of the media that you will when there is a family split up or something. You will see it done humanely. I'm very confident of that. And you will see it focused on the areas that we can, that are the most dangerous, and that is as criminals. The Laken Riley Act looks like it's going to have enough Democrats to support it in the Senate to pass, which would be awesome. That'll be a first really big win and something I've never experienced. I have been back here for 4 years. We lost the Senate majority my very first week in Congress. We should have never lost those 2 Georgia senators. That's a whole nother discussion. Water under the bridge at this point. Folks, we should have 59 U.S. Republican senators right now. We played games over the last 4 years. And in 2022, we weren't focused on winning. We were focused on retribution. And the candidates that we were putting forward weren't the best candidates to be able to win. We changed that this year. And we had excellent candidates. This McCormick guy in Pennsylvania, sensational, right? We should have been winning over the last 4 years, but we weren't. It's all good. We've got a good, strong majority. And if John Thune can go and deliver 7 Democrats to break the 60 vote threshold for an immigration bill, the Laken Riley Act, my goodness, that is a significant change, Chris, that we have not seen, because Schumer just wouldn't do it. He wouldn't touch anything. And even though he probably had Democrat senators willing to come on board with it, he refused to push it and get to that threshold. So much of the bad legislation or the inaction that took place legislatively over the last 4 years, honestly, I don't give the pain point wasn't necessarily with the Biden administration. The pain point was with Senate Majority Leader, now Senate Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer. He refused to move things, even if you had to. The House does this like very strongly conservative border security bill. It's called HR 2. Even if Schumer would have said, you know what, I think we all agree on like 4 out of these 10 aspects of this bill. Pass the 4. You had Democrats that were willing to do it, I believe. Pass the 4. We probably could have gotten there. Some would have backed away because they didn't want it. For some in my conference, it's 100% or nothing. I don't subscribe to that. I like to have an 80% conservative win and get a conservative win. Know that about me now. And keep watching me. But with that mindset, we can move the ball forward, and we could have avoided that. But Schumer he wouldn't even. We sent him over what we viewed as the perfect bill. He didn't even like drop it down to a 70% bill. He just refused to take it up and then message against it. But I think he saw that wasn't a good strategy because the Senate, flipped in a significant way. And literally, folks, if Trump wins 31 states, do the math. 31 times 2 senators. We should have 62 senators in the Republican side. There is no reason that we shouldn't, other than when those particular senates come up. Georgia is a strongly conservative state. It should not have lost ever. And then we have libertarians on the ballots in multiple places. We have Democrats winning with 48% of the vote. The Republican, first-time Republican, no name ID really, he got 47.5%. And then the Libertarian candidate got 4.5%. So great job, Mr. Libertarian in Ohio. You got 4% and you kept a Republican who you agree with on 95% of the issues out of office. Tell me how that makes sense. And we lost 2 Senate seats because of that. Probably 4 House seats because of that. We got some of them removed from the ballot before because we saw them doing it. Now, in some cases, Democrat fundraising was also propping up some of these individuals. So, I think there needs to be a moment that Republicans and libertarians come say, what don't we agree on? Smaller, limited government, peace through strength. What is it that you agree with that we don't? Like, we are simpatico on most things. If you go out and get 3% in your election, yeah, you probably have a really good win for yourself. You just created a far worse outcome, in my opinion, for the country. So it is what it is, but that's something that we have to be as a party willing to address at some point.
You think a strategy of actually going and communicating this message with the libertarians is something that we should consider now for the next 2 years, or is that just?
Didn't Senator Lee go to the convention for libertarians and like it?
Did he? I don't know.
I think he did, and he's like, "Look, support President." This was when like there was a third party like support President Trump, and they were like, "No, he doesn't have the perfect, pristine view of a libertarian." And I'm like, oh my gosh, like we're the bad, where the enemy is the perfect is the enemy of good in a lot of these cases. So I do think it can help, but that's just not my world. I had a libertarian run against me, 4%, 3, maybe 3%. I can't remember in the general. It doesn't really affect my race, right? Like some of that, a little bit of that comes, most of that comes from my side. A little bit will come from the Democrat side, but for the most part, the Green Party candidate steals votes from the Democrat, and the Libertarian steals votes from the Republican. And in a race like mine, it's not that big a deal. But in a race like Ohio Derek Marin race and Marcy Kaptur, my goodness, it was the difference of the seat. And in 2 states, in Wisconsin and Illinois, it was Michigan, Wisconsin and Michigan, it was the difference in the seat. There should be 55 at a minimum. You get the 2 senators back from Georgia, you got 57. Nevada is clearly a Trump supported state. Those are close races, but that basically turns it to 59. And you get Arizona back sometime. Arizona still votes red for the president, but not for their senators. Get really good candidates in there. You all of a sudden have 61 votes. You have over 60 votes in. But we in the House, we lost 7 seats. So let's be very real about this. For 2 straight election cycles, House Republicans have been crushing it.
Okay, that begs the question though. So if you agree on 95% of the issues, why not the Republican candidate drop out of the election and ask to support the Libertarian?
Because I don't think that a Libertarian who only gets 4% with very little name ID or any money behind that race would be able to do it. In our election cycles, Republicans and Democrats are the ones that get, I would say, what's 94.
I don't think Republican voters, if the candidate said, look, I'm dropping out because we need the issues are the important thing here. I want you to vote for the Libertarian candidate. Do you think Republican voters would vote for the Democrat?
But you're assuming that all the Republican voters show up. They just won't show up.
There's a show up aspect. There's a show up aspect that's just the reality. Like in our country, 94% in every single election, and I don't have that specific data, but at least that amount vote either Republican or Democrat, and it's a consistency thing for them. It's something that they're comfortable with. They've known that's the trend. I mean, to flip that on its head would be very. And then does that Libertarian, if he wins as a Libertarian, what does he do in Congress? He caucuses with the Republican. Why not just run as a Republican if you're a Libertarian candidate? Like this is not the area that I was expecting to go with this conversation.
Yeah, but I would assume you would caucus with the Republicans. If the issues are what's important, I would think that would be top priority.
Yeah.
Let me just give you Colorado 8. Colorado 8, we have a candidate named Gabe Evans, former police officer in Colorado, Hispanic gentleman. met his family. I did a fundraiser for him out in Colorado. Amazing guy. I was super excited about him. There's a Democrat in the seat right now. He decided to challenge. He used a message about public safety, his own background. He's a great guy. There was a libertarian in the race. He was able to work with him and talk to that person, and probably some people from the party, also from the RNC and stuff, probably came and put a little bit of pressure. Said, please get out and endorse the Republican. He did that, and we won that seat. It was the only seat we won that we flipped. Sorry, we flipped from Democrat to Republican this cycle in a blue state, in a Kamala won state. We lost 7 others, Oregon, California, and New York. We lost 7 seats, but we won that one. Now we won in Pennsylvania because Pennsylvania was a bit more of a red wave. And so those 50-50 seats went our way, but only one place in the entire country flipped in a Kamala won state. And that was Gabe Evans, Colorado 8. And it was because they were able to successfully work together and the Libertarian got out of the race. It would be so, it would take billions of dollars. It would take so much money to change the mindset of, 150,000 Republicans that for the last 20, 30 years have just voted for the Republican on that ticket, to change and be like, oh, I'll vote for the Libertarian. They have no idea. They would leave it blank.
Yeah, a lot of people don't decide how they're gonna vote till they see the ballot. If they don't see an R there, they just skip it.
They just
And
skip it. Because it's like, I don't want to make the wrong choice, but I don't know anything about this, and I don't know what the Libertarian platform is and that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
that's just reality.
Yep. It is getting late there. I know it's 9 o'clock. Or is it 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock there?
9 o'clock.
Okay, all right. So, maybe one last question, then we'll wrap it up, and anybody else question for?
Yeah, I do if nobody else does.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Javier Milei can balance the budget in Argentina when their economy was crushed, and with under 2 years, how come the United States can't balance their budget?
They're entitled.
And why are we still doing omnibus bills? Omnibus bills are a train wreck.
Okay, great. I'm glad you asked that question. So let me again, I don't engage in rhetoric. I want you guys to know that about me. I will explain the reality here. If you think that we can fix the budget or the deficit because of the omnibus, you're completely clueless about what our real problems are. Omnibuses, I would love them to go away. I wish we voted on all 12 bills individually, and we do on the Republican side. And hopefully with a Senate majority back, we'll be able to drive more of that going forward. But whether the 12 appropriations bills are all done individually, or they are packaged together in a bill in a group of 6 or a group of 12, the dollar amount doesn't change more than, I would say, maybe $5 billion. Okay, we have a $2 trillion deficit. The appropriations bills, the omnibus is only, the total number of it is $1.5 trillion. Our total expenditures is over 6 trillion. So we're talking 20% of our budget is where the omnibus plays into effect. And the majority of that omnibus, the majority of that $1.5 to $1.7 trillion bill, the majority of that is defense, homeland security, veterans. Those are all driven by the Republican Party. So, yes, omnibuses are a train wreck. We hate them. Everybody hates them. Every Republican hates them. We wish we could do them all individually. But a handful of Republicans will never vote for any of them. They will vote for them on the Republican side, but once the Senate gets them to the point where they meet the 60 threshold, then we'll get a group of people that will say, it's not the bill I sent over. I don't want. If it's not exactly the bill I want, I won't vote for it. And then it comes back and then it has to get negotiated. So it's a frustration for me as well. But the reason that we are in a different situation as Milley, trust me, I'm following along with what Milley's doing. I love what he did. He's moving public sector jobs back to the private sector. They don't have near the entitlement programs that we have. We're entrenched in a lot of these things. And they their overall, their debt to GDP ratio wasn't as high as what ours is. So we are in a worse situation regarding the ability to do that quickly. But we have a very strong economy and have multiple factors that still put us in a better situation than where Argentina is. That said, I'm actually very inspired by what Millie's doing. As far as Doge goes, you're going to see some of that same type of stuff. Hopefully, we can complete and do some of that same stuff. But folks, here's one unique aspect. We don't vote on approximately 80% of our budget on an annual basis. We only vote on about 20%. This is because Medicare goes on. It's a mandatory direct spending program. Medicaid, Social Security, net interest on the debt is obviously something you don't vote on. It's out there. Argentina wasn't paying $200 billion a year, or sorry, now it's 1 trillion, but for 7 years ago, it was about $250 billion. They weren't paying that type of money. People weren't buying their treasuries and their notes like that. They didn't have that net interest issue that we have. The fact that we have a net interest issue is a good thing because that means people are still investing in us. And T-bills are a positive thing. And that people still want to invest in us because we have a strong credit rating and a strong outlook. That said, it's an added expenditure as well that we can't just eliminate like Millie can. But it's inspiring and I love it. And we're watching it and we're going to use some of those anecdotes in this Doge approach, but it doesn't happen overnight like they were kind of able to do it down there. Regardless, pretty neat to see. So
Well,
anyway.
Yeah, Representative Moore, I just, again, I want to thank you. I having been in this position and being able to communicate with our representatives, including yourself, I think that we have an amazing Utah delegation, both in the Senate and the House. I really appreciate all the work you do, and I understand a lot better the pressures and frustrations and the things that you go through. And I certainly am a very changed person after understanding some of this. And a lot of that is because you're willing to communicate with us and come on like today. And you know, others are willing to do the same thing. So again, thank you so much. Thank you for giving us the time. And I hope we can do it some more in the future. And let us know if there's anything, it sounds like you got some videos coming up. We'll try to watch those, get those out. Anything you'd like us to communicate, let us know, because I think the more communication, the better.
That's my big learning over the last 4 years. And I've learned it in tough situations. Anytime there's a tough vote or something, I will try to do a series of town halls after it. And I've learned one thing over 4 years. The people that leave that town hall, they may have come angry and they hear me out and they know that I'm an honest person. You may not always agree with me, but you will appreciate the fact that I'm not going to spew rhetoric and I'm going to tell you the truth. And guess what? If by doing that, I end up not in this seat, I can walk away and be totally good because I got a great life back home. Like my wife, we were on about another 8-day stretch. We were on about a 13-day stretch a couple of weeks ago. It's been tough lately, but like I'm so engaged and excited about what I'm doing, and she's proud of me, and the boys starting to get it a little bit. Like I am going to take this opportunity to try to change our trajectory and be a part of that. And our budget committee chairman is like, he and I are kindred spirits. Jody Arrington, you should follow some of the stuff he does. He's out of Texas, great guy. But just know that I'll always come back and I'll tell you the truth. And if you want to read, please read my press releases, because it is the same way. Even in the tough votes, I will explain things. And I'm going to even do more and more of that going forward, because I'm sick of taking second place at convention. I'm done with it. If you knew how hard I was working, Americans for Prosperity, that supports every one of our state legislators, and they use Utah as a model. They were giving a presentation the other day, and somebody asked, like, and this was a national perspective. We had a handful of people like Candace Perucci there, a couple others. And they said, hey, who in this world is like really focused on like all the debt stuff? And they said, well, let me say this. A congressman out of Utah, Blake Moore, he is like dead engaged in all of this. And and Candace knows me, and so she gets it, but I think they were also a little surprised because, you know, I may not be viewed to some because I don't, you know, get the attention on social media and all that kind of stuff. But they're like, yeah, but he's leading our bill. And our bill, the Comprehensive Congressional Budget Act, is the part that would solve so much of this. If we only vote on 20% of our budget and it's the smallest portion, guess what? We're never going to solve the problem. If you were a CEO and you were told you could only address 20% of your P&L, you're going to be done. Your company cannot survive. We have to be able to, I want a Medicare vote every year. I want a Social Security vote every year. I want to vote on Medicaid. I want to vote on welfare programs. I will vote for some of these things. We need safety nets. We need these programs. We got to strengthen them though. We got to reform them along the way. But because they go on autopilot, we never fix them. And they grow at the rate of 12, 13, 20%. Our appropriations process, and back to the omnibus, that grows at a rate of 1 to 3%. Because we vote on it every year, we keep it down. And that's the biggest problem. The omnibus is not the reason we're in debt. The reason we're in debt is because we don't vote on the other 80% of our budget. And that's the Americans for Prosperity that they put out, the Comprehensive Congressional Budget Act. If we actually enacted something like that, plus you could do the REINS Act and things like that, like there would be real reform back here. And, you know, it gets at me. I get frustrated at it. But back to the point of, folks, we're in line. I do not have a supermajority. Our state legislature does, and I love them for it. I'm grateful that they're moving things in the right direction. They're keeping everything strong. I'm fighting a different battle back here. And everybody in the House delegation and the Senate delegation is fighting the same battle. And we would love to just know there's support back there. Trust us, but also verify with us. And that's what Chris has been doing a great job with. And I'll continue to share as much context as I have. And just please know that like my motivation back here is to move this ship in the other direction. And once you do that, you can build success on success, and we can do this again. And we have done it as a nation before. We're the greatest nation in the world. We've got the best economy, and this is a time sort of to hit this. We're going to push Trump on some things, and he's not going to like it, right? He won on a border. He won on a strong message of the economy. We're going to deliver those things for him too, but we're going to request that we do things that we didn't do in the first Trump administration, and that is find some significant spending reform. We have to do it. We don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. Revenue has remained at about 17% of GDP. Spending has increased up to 24 more percent. And part of our, and so it's frustrating. Even when we do tax cuts, we still have strong revenues after. That's because of economic growth. When you do spending initiatives like the Democrats do, you still get good revenue because the revenue comes off of that, but it's artificial, right? But we have kept strong revenue basically for 20, 30, 40 years back here, 17%, but our spending has gone up. It's because our demographics have changed. So those are the aspects that I'm dealing with. Please engage with me as much as you can. Please share some of the things that you've learned from me. That's why I have no problem recording anything. It's because if I'm willing to say it in private, I'm willing to say it in public. If you're not like that, then you shouldn't be back in Congress, in my opinion. So
I appreciate it. Thank you so
Appreciate
much.
Thank you.
Yep. Thank you all. I really appreciate it.
All right. Hope you get back home soon to your family.
Should be tomorrow. I'm actually going to go to the President Carter's funeral tomorrow at the National Cathedral. It's in the morning. We have one vote in the afternoon, and then I'm on a flight home. So,
Well, that's good. Very good to hear.
Does that mean you'll be in person at Eagle Forum?
I'll be in person at Eagle Forum. Yeah.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
See you there.
I'll see you there. I'm going to have some slides, and it will actually visualize a lot of what I talked about today. So I hope it's not too repetitive for you.
Great, awesome.
Thanks, y'all.
Okay, thanks so much.